On your knees, black boy. Sergeant Terry Nolan said it the way men say things they have said 100 times before. Easy, unhurried, with the flat confidence of someone who has never once faced a consequence for his words. He pulled off his boot and dropped it on the hallway floor between them. The sound echoed off the tile walls. You want to work in this precinct? He nodded toward the boot. Start there. That's how we break in new blood around here. The man in the plain tan uniform knelt down. He picked up the boot. He began to clean it. Officer Benson leaned against the wall and laughed. Look at that! Like he was born for it! Dawson crossed his arms, grinning. They always send us one of these. Affirmative action special. Don't worry, he won't last the month. Nolan looked down at the kneeling man and tilted his head. See, this is exactly where you belong. On the floor doing what you're told. That's your place here, and the sooner you accept that, the easier your life gets. The man said nothing. Steady hands. Even strokes. Not a single muscle moved in his face. When he finished, he stood, straightened his uniform, looked Nolan directly in the eye, not with rage, not with shame, with something so calm and so total that Nolan's grin flickered for just a half-second. I'm going to need your badge number, Sergeant. The hallway erupted with laughter. Nolan shook his badge in the man's face. Frame it, rookie. What Terry Nolan did not know, standing there with clean boots and a wide grin, was that the man he had just put on his knees had a captain's commission folded in the inner pocket of that plain uniform. And in 8 minutes, he would be standing at the front of the room that Nolan had spent 25 years believing was his. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. And if you've never subscribed, this is the story that earns it. Darius Cole had been a detective first grade for 11 of his 18 years on the force. He had cleared 94% of his homicide cases in his best year, a record that still stood in the Hargrove PD database, highlighted in yellow by whoever had last run the annual performance report. He held the Medal of Valor. He had 3 formal commendations for outstanding leadership. He had been selected by the Mayor's Criminal Justice Reform Task Force after a 14-month review process that examined 62 candidates from across the state of Ohio. This morning, he was wearing a plain tan training uniform. No insignia. No rank. His ID badge read simply D. Cole Officer Candidate. He had made that choice the same way he made most decisions, quietly, completely, without announcing the reasoning until the reasoning had finished doing its work. Deputy Chief Eleanor Sims had given him the full briefing 3 weeks ago in her 5th-floor office at the Central Administration Building, with the door closed and her voice low, even though they were alone. 4 black officers at the 7th Precinct in 3 years. All of them gone. 2 formal complaints filed, and then routed into an internal review process that produced no findings, no disciplinary action, and no documentation that anyone could locate today. A 3rd complaint that had been filed, and then simply ceased to exist in the system, not dismissed, not resolved, simply absent the way a page disappears when someone removes it from a binder and never replaces it. A 4th officer, a woman named Renata Brooks, who had resigned on a Thursday morning and driven out of the parking lot without leaving a forwarding address with anyone. Sims had set both hands flat on her desk and looked at him directly. I need you to see it before they see you, she said. Walk in as nobody. Let me know what that building does to nobody. He had understood immediately. He had not argued. He pulled into the 7th Precinct parking lot at 7:28 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late October, a travel mug of black coffee sitting cold in the cup holder and his captain's commission folded in the inner pocket of his jacket. The lot was already half full. He sat in the car for 4 minutes, not because he was preparing himself, but because the parking lot was information. He read it the way he had always read scenes before stepping into them. Who walked with whom? Who held the entrance door open, and who let it swing shut behind them? Which clusters of officers moved easily, and which ones moved with the careful weight of people who were always measuring themselves against something invisible? In the far corner, 2 men stood beside a pickup truck. The way the shorter one deferred his body language toward the taller, without appearing to almost unconscious, almost architectural, told Cole something about the informal hierarchy of this building that no organizational chart would ever confirm. The lobby of the 7th smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. A desk officer looked up briefly when Cole signed the visitor log, then looked back down. Cole moved through the main corridor toward the equipment room on the east side, where he had been told his locker assignment was waiting. The building had a specific energy. He felt it before he could name it, the energy of a place where certain people had been comfortable for a very long time and had never once been asked to examine that comfort. It lived in the way voices carried in the hallways, loose and unguarded. In the ease of the laughter coming from the break room on his left, laughter that didn't lower itself for anyone. In the way 3 officers stepped aside for a 4th without thinking about it, and the way a 5th officer, young black, walking alone toward the stairwell with a folder tucked under his arm, pulled his path slightly toward the wall as the group passed. Not dramatically, not consciously. Just a small, automatic adjustment that spoke of long practice. That 5th officer was Jalen Parks. Cole had read his file before arriving. 26 years old. 6 months at the 7th. 2 formal commendations submitted by a direct supervisor, and then quietly shelved both without explanation, and both within 6 weeks of Sergeant Terry Nolan's filing dates on 2 separate internal memos. Cole stored Parks' face in the section of his mind he kept for things that needed to come back to him. He was 12 feet from the east hallway entrance when he heard them coming. 3 voices, loud and overlapping, still running on the momentum of a joke that had started somewhere outside in the parking lot. The footsteps had the loose, deliberate rhythm of men who moved through spaces they had long since stopped thinking of as shared. Sergeant Terry Nolan came around the corner first. 52 years old. 25 years on the force. Broad-shouldered and gray at the temples, with the particular bearing of a man who had been deferred to for so long that deference had become part of the atmosphere around him, as invisible to him as the air in a room he had never once been asked to leave. Behind him, Officer Craig Benson, 41, 14 years in coffee cup in hand, and Officer Pete Dawson, 38, thick-necked, still grinning at whatever the punchline had been. They stopped when they saw Cole. Nolan looked him over slowly, top to bottom, the way men look at things they are in the process of deciding about. "Hold on," Nolan said. His voice was smooth, warm almost. Almost. Cole kept walking. "I said hold on." Not a request this time. The warmth had found its edge. Cole stopped. He looked at Nolan and waited. "You the new hire they sent over?" Nolan tilted his head slightly, a small performance of curiosity. "The diversity pick." He let those 2 words sit in the air between them with a deliberate, careful weight. Cole said nothing. Nolan's eyes moved to Benson and Dawson, briefly checking that they were present, that the audience was in place. Then he looked back at Cole, and something settled in his expression. The look of a man who had already made a decision and was now simply beginning to carry it out. "We have a tradition here at the 7th, he said. "Every new man earns his place. Doesn't matter what the paperwork says." He reached down and pulled off his boot. At the far end of the corridor, Carl Okafor stood beside his mop bucket with his eyes on the floor. The boot landed on the tile floor between them with a flat, hard sound. Nolan nodded toward it, the gesture of a man who has performed this particular motion many times before and finds it effortless. Every new face that comes through that door goes through it. no exceptions. He spread his hands wide, perfectly reasonable. It's not personal, it's tradition. It tells us what kind of man you are, whether you know how to take direction, whether you understand your place. He paused and let his eyes settle on Cole with specific intention. Some people need that lesson more than others. Cole looked at the boot, then at Nolan's face. Then, without a word, he set his bag down on the floor beside him. He reached into the side pocket and pulled out a small cloth, an old habit, 18 years of working crime scenes where you needed something clean in your hands. He knelt down. He began to clean the boot. Nolan looked back at Benson with a slow, spreading grin. Benson's shoulders shook with a low, satisfied laugh. Dawson leaned against the wall, crossed his arms, and watched with the settled ease of a man watching a familiar show reach its expected conclusion. "There it is," Nolan said to no one in particular. "That's what respect looks like." Cole said nothing. He worked steadily, methodically, with the focused quiet of someone performing a task that required his full attention. The expression on his face had not changed from the moment Nolan stepped in front of him in the corridor. It would not change. 15 feet away, Carl Okafor stood beside his mop bucket. He had stopped pretending to work. He was watching openly now, not with the theatrical gaze of a man looking for a scene, but with the still private attention of someone who has witnessed something he knows is wrong and is trying to decide what that knowledge requires of him. His hand moved slowly into the front pocket of his work shirt. He pulled out his phone. He held it low-angled toward the hallway. He pressed record. He did not know exactly why. Only that something about the absolute stillness of the kneeling man told him this moment was not yet finished. "How long you been on the job?" Dawson asked, his voice carrying the particular laziness of someone who already knew the answer didn't matter to him. Cole did not respond. "He's quiet," Benson observed. "I like that. Less trouble." A short laugh. "Quiet and on his knees, that's exactly the kind of officer we need around here." Nolan watched Cole work for another moment. He looked down at the man's face, at the total unbroken calm of it, the eyes that registered everything and gave back nothing, and something small and irritated moved across his expression. Not concern. More like the slight confusion of a man who threw a stone into water and heard no splash. He covered it quickly and recovered his grin. "You know what the best part of this is?" he said, the register of a teacher explaining something obvious to someone slow. "It doesn't matter who you were before you walked in here. Detective rookie transfer, whatever the city thinks it sent us. In this precinct, you are exactly what we decide you are. And right now," he glanced down at Cole with wide, easy satisfaction, "you're the man who cleans boots." Benson laughed. Two other officers who had drifted to the edge of the hallway, drawn by the voices, drawn by the specific magnetic quality of a performance in progress, laughed along with him. Cole finished the first boot. He placed it on the floor. He looked at Dawson's boot, which Dawson had dropped in front of him, without being asked, with a small theatrical gesture that produced another ripple of laughter. Cole picked it up. He began to clean it. "Natural," Benson said, shaking his head slowly. "Like he was made for it." At the far end of the corridor, Jalen Parks had come back down the stairwell. He had left a report folder on the second floor and turned around halfway up, and now he stood at the edge of the east hallway and saw the man kneeling on the floor and the men standing over him, and the laughter bouncing off the tile walls, and something happened in his chest that was not quite nausea and not quite recognition, but something in between. The feeling of a person who has been in versions of this room many times and has each time made the calculation that the cost of speaking was too high. He stood completely still. He did not go forward. He did not go back. Cole finished the second boot. He set it down. He stood. He straightened the front of his uniform with both hands in one clean, unhurried motion, as if he had just completed any ordinary task. He looked at Nolan, then at Benson, then at Dawson, then back at Nolan. His eyes moved over each face with the steady, cataloging attention of a man who has spent 18 years reading rooms and knows exactly what he is looking at. The laughter had started to thin at the edges. "I'll need badge numbers from each of you," Cole said. The hallway erupted louder than before, the laughter of relief and disbelief, and the shared pleasure of men who believe they have just watched someone embarrass themselves completely and permanently. Nolan unclipped his badge and held it inches from Cole's face, swinging it lightly. "Number 4419, rookie. Go ahead and frame it." Cole looked at the badge. He memorized the number. He memorized Benson's when Benson held his up with a mocking little bow. He memorized Dawson's when Dawson sang each digit aloud in a high theatrical voice. Nolan 4419, Benson 4271, Dawson 4388. He picked up his bag from the floor. He walked away at an even pace. Not fast, not slow. As he passed Jalen Parks at the end of the corridor, Cole turned his head slightly and met the young officer's eyes for exactly 1 second. Something passed between them in that second that neither of them would have been able to name. Parks stood very still long after Cole had turned the corner. 8 minutes. The assembly room was filling up. The assembly room of the 7th Precinct held 46 chairs arranged in 6 rows behind a center aisle with a podium at the front and a corkboard on the wall behind it, still pinned with the previous month's duty rotation chart. Cole came in through the side door at 7:52 a.m. and took the last row center position. He set his bag on the chair beside him, folded his hands in his lap, and waited. He had not changed his uniform. The boot polish was still faint on the knuckle of his right hand. He had made that decision in the East Corridor, the same way he had made the decision to kneel, the same way he had chosen to arrive in a plain uniform in the first place. Because the room was about to understand something, and he wanted every person in it to understand it without ambiguity. Officers filed in over the next several minutes, carrying the loose energy of the morning coffee cups, half-eaten sandwiches, conversations that resumed mid-sentence from wherever they'd been left in the hallway. A few glanced at Cole in the back row. New face. Unremarkable uniform. Their eyes passed over him and moved on without stopping. Benson entered at 7:55 and spotted Cole immediately. He stopped walking for half a step. A small, involuntary hesitation. Then recovered, nudged Dawson with his elbow, and the two of them exchanged the particular look of men sharing a private joke at someone else's expense. Benson settled into the third row, still grinning. Nolan came in at 7:57, moved to the front row with the natural ease of a man who had occupied that chair for 25 years, without ever once being asked to give it up. He leaned back. He said something to the officer beside him that produced a short laugh. He had not looked toward the back of the room. He did not need to. Jalen Parks took a seat in the 4th row aisle side. He had not looked directly at Cole since the corridor, but he had not been able to stop watching the room, either his eyes moving between Nolan in the front and the plain uniformed man in the back, with the expression of someone waiting for the two ends of something to connect. Lieutenant Frank Braddock reached the podium at 7:59. 53 years old, 20 years at the 7th, a man who had perfected the art of being present in a room without being accountable for anything that happened in it. Papers in both hands, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, his gaze moving around the assembly in the practiced pattern of someone who has learned to look busy enough to avoid direct questions. His eyes passed over Cole in the back row without pausing. 8 o'clock, Braddock opened his mouth. The main door opened. Both panels pushed wide. The sound of a room changing is something you feel before you can explain it. Chairs scraped back. Spines straightened without instruction. Conversations stopped mid-word, mid-syllable, mid-breath. 43 officers came to attention in a single involuntary movement, the way a current moves through water when something large enters it. Deputy Chief Eleanor Sims walked in first. Full-dress uniform. Every button fastened, every crease precise, every bar and medal exactly placed. She was 58 years old, and she entered that room the way she had entered every room for the past 30 years. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the particular gravity of a person who has earned the right to arrive and intends to use it. She did not look around. She walked directly to the front, and the assembled officers parted for her without thinking about it. Behind her, Chief Robert Vasquez, composed and direct eyes moving over the room, with the calm assessment of a man who had read every relevant report this week and was here to make one thing official. Braddock stepped back from the podium so quickly he nearly knocked his papers to the floor. Sims set both hands flat on the surface and looked out at the room. She let the silence do its work. Let it build and settle and press down on every chair and every row until the hum of the overhead fluorescent lights became the loudest sound in the room. Then she spoke. Officers of the 7th Precinct. Her voice filled every corner without effort or strain. I am here this morning to formally introduce your new commanding officer. Something changed in the room. Not physically a shift in atmosphere, in pressure, the way air changes before weather arrives. A low murmur moved through the back rows. Nolan's posture changed by a single degree, his shoulders lifting slightly, his chin coming up. His expression had the particular alertness of a man recalibrating for a situation that was moving in an unexpected direction. Sims continued. He has 18 years on this force. He holds the Medal of Valor and 3 commendations for outstanding leadership. He was selected by the Chief's office and the Mayor's Criminal Justice Reform Task Force after a 14-month review. She paused, and in that pause the room held completely still. He is the first black officer ever appointed to command the 7th Precinct in its 61-year history. Another pause. Effective today, he holds the rank of captain. She stepped to the side. In the last row, Darius Cole stood up. He rose without hurry. He smoothed the front of his plain tan uniform with both hands. He walked down the center aisle at an even pace, and every eye in the room followed him. The boot polish was still visible on his right knuckle. He had not changed. He had not cleaned up. He walked to the front of that room exactly as Terry Nolan had left him, and he stood at the podium and looked out at 43 officers who were only now, in this moment, understanding the shape of the morning they had been part of. He reached into his jacket pocket and set his captain's insignia on the podium. He did not put it on yet. He let it sit there visible to every person in the room. Then he looked at Benson. Benson had gone the color of old chalk, his mouth slightly open, the grin completely erased. He looked at Dawson. Dawson was staring at the floor. He looked at Nolan. Nolan stared back. The ease was gone. The ownership was gone. The settled, practiced confidence that had filled every corner of the east hallway 40 minutes ago had drained out of his face and left something behind that was smaller and harder and far less certain. Cole held his gaze for one long, unhurried second. Then he reached down and pinned the insignia to his chest, slowly, deliberately, directly above the faint smudge of boot polish still visible on the front of his uniform. He looked back up. "Good morning," he said. "I believe I already have some of your badge numbers." The room did not move, did not breathe. The silence was not the comfortable silence of people waiting politely. It was the airless, pressing silence of 43 people who had just understood all at once and with total clarity exactly what kind of morning this had been. Cole let it sit. Then he spoke again, his voice even and unhurried. I don't believe in long introductions. I believe in work. Shift assignments remain unchanged. You'll be hearing from me this week. He gathered the papers from the podium in one clean motion. Dismissed. Chairs scraped. The room came slowly back to life around him. Nobody approached. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody welcomed him. That was fine. He had not come here to be welcomed. In the hallway outside the assembly room, Deputy Chief Sims was waiting, and the expression on her face told him that the next conversation had already begun. The hallway outside the assembly room had emptied by the time Sims reached Cole. She positioned herself near the far wall, far enough from the last departing officers for a private conversation close enough that he didn't have to go looking for her. Chief Vasquez had already moved toward the elevator, pausing briefly to exchange words with Braddock on his way out. Braddock nodded along with the careful composure of a man doing his best to appear unsurprised by everything that had just happened inside that room. Sims waited until the corridor was completely clear. Then she turned to Cole. I want Nolan pulled off the floor today. Her voice was low and controlled the register she used when she was managing serious anger inside professional constraints. Him and Benson both. What happened in that hallway this morning is grounds for immediate suspension, minimum. Not yet, Cole said. She looked at him. Darius? Not yet, Eleanor. He kept his voice level, his eyes on the corner where the last officer had disappeared. If I pull them this morning, every officer in this building who owes Nolan a favor goes quiet and goes careful. I lose my window completely. Your window? She repeated, testing the weight of the word. He turned and looked at her directly. Right now, they don't know what I know, or how much I've already seen. The moment I move on Nolan, that advantage disappears permanently, and I only have it once. It doesn't come back. He held her gaze. I need to see the whole structure first, all of it. Then we move. She studied him for a long moment. The worry on her face was real, the specific version that meant she understood his reasoning completely and hated it anyway because she had fought too hard and waited too long to watch the first week dismantle itself before it had properly begun. 72 hours, she said. After that, I act with or without your timing. That's all I need. She held his gaze one beat longer. Then she nodded once, buttoned her jacket, and walked toward the elevator without looking back. He watched her go. Then he turned and headed upstairs. His office was on the 4th floor, last door on the left. Small and functional, one window, facing the parking lot below, a desk that had served better decades without complaint, a chair that leaned slightly right when you sat in it. The previous captain had left behind a stack of fishing magazines on the windowsill, a 2021 wall calendar, still open to February, and a dusty coffee mug printed with the words, World's Greatest Boss, in faded block letters. Cole threw the calendar in the trash on his way to the desk. He watered a struggling potted plant on the windowsill that nobody had touched in weeks. He left the mug. There was something useful about an office that didn't announce itself too loudly. He sat down, opened his bag, pulled out his legal pad, and was writing his second name when Vera Hutchins knocked at the door. She was in her mid-50s, civilian clothes, reading glasses pushed up on her head, carrying a manila folder. In both hands held slightly forward the posture of someone delivering something they have waited a very long time to hand to the right person. She had been civilian records coordinator at the 7th Precinct for 22 years. Captain Cole. Her voice was careful and professional, but her eyes said something more than her voice was saying. They said I have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time. "Sit down, Ms. Hutchins," he said. She sat. She placed the folder on the desk and slid it across without being asked. He opened it. Personnel files. Complaint histories. Incident cross-references organized by year going back 5 years. Every page clean tab. Tabbed indexed and entirely unsolicited. "How long have you been keeping these?" "Since the 3rd time I watched it happen," she said, and nobody with the authority to act on it did a single thing. He looked back at the files. 4 black officers in 5 years. Every departure preceded by the same sequence: a period of documented harassment, a union complaint filed against the departing officer within days of any pushback, a strategic disclosure to a local press contact, then silence. The officer left. The file closed. The precinct moved on. Disproportionately black every single time, the kind of pattern that resembles coincidence until you lay all 4 cases side by side on the same desk, and then it looks exactly like what it is. He turned a page. He wrote a 3rd name on his legal pad, then a 4th. "There's a 5th, Vera said quietly. She had not moved from her chair. "Officer Jalen Parks, still here. 6 months in." A pause. "He's been surviving, not serving. There's a real difference between those 2 things. I don't know how much longer he'll last." Cole wrote Parks' name on the pad and circled it carefully. He worked through the files for 2 more hours. The afternoon light moved across his desk in long, slow angles. Outside his window, the day shift ended officers walking out to the lot in familiar clusters, easy and comfortable, carrying the settled ease of a building where most of them had never once been asked to examine what that ease was built on. At 6:45 p.m., he saw Nolan at the far edge of the parking lot. Standing beside his car phone pressed hard to his ear, his free hand cutting sharp and emphatic gestures through the air. Not laughing. Making calls. The deliberate, focused body language of a man running damage control with the practiced efficiency of someone who knows exactly which calls matter most and which order they go in. Cole watched him until he got in his car and drove away. He looked back at his legal pad. 8 names now. At 7:12 p.m., his phone rang. An attorney named Richard Foley, representing Officer Craig Benson. Smooth voice, professionally courteous, unhurried. His client had filed a formal complaint against Captain Cole, approached aggressively in the east hallway. That morning badge information demanded, in a threatening and intimidating tone, hostile work environment deliberately created. The police union had agreed to represent Benson fully in the matter. Cole let him finish. He looked out the window at the dark, empty lot below. "Thank you for the call, Mr. Foley," he said, his voice completely flat. "Have a good evening." He hung up. He sat very still. He picked up his pen, turned to a fresh page, and wrote one word at the top. Timeline. In the parking lot below, the light in Nolan's second-floor office window was still burning. The man had made his calls, returned to his desk, and kept working. Not panicking. Not reactive. Organized and deliberate, the behavior of someone who had run this exact playbook before, trusted it completely, and had never once seen it fail. Cole understood. He had read the playbook cover to cover now. The only thing left was to rewrite the ending. The Hargrove Tribune article went live at 6:41 a.m. on the morning of day 2. Not in print, nobody waited for print anymore. It spread as a forwarded link through the precinct's unofficial group message chain, the one Cole was not on, and that nobody had mentioned to him. By the time he pulled into the parking lot at 7:22 a.m., it had been read, screenshotted, and discussed in at least 4 separate conversations happening simultaneously in that building. Vera Hutchins was outside his office door when he reached the 4th floor. She held out her phone without a word. Cole took it and read. The headline, "Questions Surround New Captain's First Day at 7th Precinct." The body of the article was carefully constructed, vague enough to be legally defensible, specific enough to inflict damage. Anonymous sources close to the department. An altercation between the new captain and a subordinate officer. Multiple unnamed sources characterizing her conduct as aggressive and unprofessional. The department had declined to comment. The union was involved. He read it twice, handed the phone back. "How long has it been up?" "Since 6:41. About 40 minutes before you arrived." He nodded. He unlocked his office, went inside, and closed the door. He had 11 minutes before the morning briefing. He used them. He called Sims first. She had already seen it. "It's deliberately vague," Cole said, standing at his window eyes on the parking lot below. "No specifics because they don't want specifics on record yet. They just want the headline sitting there before anyone can respond to it. They want the first version of this story to be entirely theirs." "It's working," Sims said. Her voice was compressed, controlled, the specific tone she used for managing serious frustration inside a professional frame. "I've already had 3 calls from the commissioner's office this morning." "What did you tell them?" "That I have full confidence in Captain Cole and that the department will be conducting a thorough review of the relevant events." "Don't engage the article publicly," Cole said. "Not one word. The moment we respond directly, we're playing their game on their timetable. I'm not doing that." A pause. 72 hours, Darius. We agreed." "I know." He went downstairs. Nolan was already on the floor, and the change was immediate and total. The loose, reckless energy of Tuesday morning, the ease of a man who believed himself completely untouchable, had been replaced by something careful and deliberate. He moved through the shift with visible, calibrated collegiality. He held the elevator for a junior officer. He answered a third-year's question with patient, unhurried detail. He laughed at appropriate moments without overdoing it. Every gesture was measured. Every pleasant interaction was a future witness statement being quietly assembled in real time right in front of everyone, right in front of Cole. Benson had recalibrated to careful neutrality. He passed Cole in the main corridor at 9:10 a.m. with a brief professional nod. Nothing actionable, nothing personal, and everything completely intentional. 2 other officers from the East Hallway had similarly transformed overnight, unremarkable by the book, giving Cole nothing useful. The smirks were still there. They were just carried inward now, kept in a place where they couldn't be documented or used against anyone. Cole submitted the formal request for East Hallway surveillance footage at 9 a.m. through Lieutenant Braddock's office with a copy simultaneously sent to Department Attorney Samantha Cross. Standard procedure, clean documentation, nothing that could be questioned. Braddock appeared at his office door at 2:17 p.m. He knocked twice and entered without being invited, standing just inside the doorway, with the rehearsed posture of a man who has prepared exactly what he intends to say and is still not entirely at peace with it. "About your footage request." He cleared his throat. "The East Hallway camera, the one covering the section near the equipment room. It's been experiencing technical issues for the past several weeks." Cole looked at him steadily. "How many weeks exactly?" 6, maybe 7. Maintenance backlog. These things accumulate. "I'll need the complete maintenance records." Something moved across Braddock's face. Brief, controlled, quickly managed. "Of course. I'll have them pulled together. Today, please." He nodded once and left. Cole watched the door close behind him and wrote 2 things on his legal pad camera. Braddock. Union Representative Dennis Harwick arrived at 3 p.m. well-dressed and practiced, carrying his briefcase with the relaxed ease of a man accustomed to sitting across from police captains and leaving with what he came for. He set up in the second-floor conference room, and sent word through Braddock's assistant, deliberately not through Cole's office, which Cole noted and filed away that he was available at Cole's convenience. Cole made him wait 25 minutes. Then he went in. Harwick walked through Benson's formal complaint with professional neutrality. No editorializing. Just facts, he implied. Just process. When he finished, he folded his hands flat on the table and leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to the warm, private register of a man offering a courtesy. These situations don't always have to become public battles, Captain. There are paths that serve everyone's interests. His eyes held Cole's. Quiet paths. If the department were willing to move forward without pursuing disciplinary action related to Tuesday's events, I believe we could reach a resolution that benefits everyone involved. Cole looked at the folded hands, and the reasonable face, and the carefully practiced machinery of a man who had made this offer many times before and had almost always received something useful in return. My answer is no, Cole said. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out without looking back. The maintenance records arrived at 4:45 p.m., incomplete 3 pages, where the department's standard equipment logging protocol required at least 7. The submission date of the original repair request was absent. The technician's sign-off was blank. But what stopped Cole was not what the records said. It was the geography. He pulled the building's full equipment status map from the facilities log. Every camera in the 7th Precinct building was operational. Every single one, except the precise 15-foot section of the east hallway directly outside the equipment room entrance. The exact location, the exact stretch. That kind of surgical specificity was not the result of a maintenance backlog. That was a decision made by someone who knew exactly which 15 feet needed to go dark and when. He reached back into Vera's files and found a name she had mentioned the previous afternoon, Marcus Greer. 39 years old. Former officer at the 7th Precinct. Resigned 4 years ago with no forwarding note and no exit interview recorded in any file anyone could locate. Vera had said quietly, almost as an aside, I heard he kept copies of things. Cole picked up his phone. Marcus Greer had agreed to meet on one condition, nowhere near the 7th Precinct, and nowhere he could be recognized by anyone who still carried a Hargrove PD badge. He named a diner on Emerson Avenue corner booth, away from the windows Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. Cole arrived at 5:58. Greer was already seated, both hands wrapped around a coffee cup, watching the door. 39 years old, working private security, now wearing a dark jacket, and the particular self-contained composure of a man who had rebuilt something carefully and was permanently aware of how fragile rebuilt things can be. He looked up when Cole sat across from him. He did not extend his hand. You're really the new captain, he said. Not a question. He was confirming something he was still processing. I am. Greer read him for a moment, the careful, private way a person reads a stranger when they have been burned by enough familiar faces to understand that familiarity is not the same thing as trustworthiness. Then he looked back at his cup. He talked about his current job for 90 seconds. The firm, the clients, steady work. Then he stopped. He looked back at Cole. You didn't come here to talk about my career. No, Cole said. I didn't. He laid out what he had found in Vera's files. Not everything. Enough the 4 officers, the timeline, the identical shape repeated with the same name at the center of each case. He spoke plainly, and without softening any of it. Greer listened without interrupting. His hands tightened gradually around the coffee cup as Cole spoke a slow, controlled recognition, the look of a man watching fragments of something come together that he has been carrying separately for a very long time. When Cole finished, the diner was quiet around them. His name was in my case, Greer said. Nolan. Not in any official document, they were too careful for that. But he was always there behind every piece of it. He looked at his hands. My second month at the 7th, my assignment logs started coming back altered after I submitted them. Reports filed under my name would appear in someone else's record 2 days later. I was assigned the worst foot patrol in the city 4 separate times in 6 weeks, a neighborhood with 2 active shooting investigations, while a white officer with barely 1 year of experience handled desk work downtown. When I filed a formal grievance, it went to Braddock, and Braddock walked it directly to Nolan, and Nolan called me into his office and explained how things worked at the 7th. What happened when you pushed back? Greer's jaw tightened. I filed a complaint against Benson. He made a comment in front of 6 witnesses that I couldn't walk away from. 2 days later, I had a union complaint filed against me. Conduct unbecoming. Insubordination. He exhaled, short, dry, entirely without humor. The union rep told me it could disappear quietly if I dropped my complaint and kept my head down. A pause. I didn't drop it. So it didn't disappear. And then something got leaked to a Tribune reporter, I never found out exactly what, and suddenly there were questions about my conduct moving through the building with no source anyone could point to, and nothing I could directly refute. He looked at the window beside their booth at the ordinary Tuesday evening moving past outside. I held on for 4 more months, he said quietly. Then I had nothing left to hold on with. Cole looked at him. I'm sorry. Greer turned back. His eyes were steady. Don't be sorry. Do something. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed his phone flat on the table between them. My last day at the 7th. I was standing outside Braddock's office waiting for my exit paperwork. Nolan came out of the conference room down the hall. He didn't see me. He was on his phone talking to someone. Greer looked at the device. I pressed record. Cole went very still. 5 minutes and 42 seconds, Greer said. Nolan's voice. Clear. He says my name. He says guys like me will never command real respect at the 7th Precinct. He says the complaint system works for people who understand how it works. He says my career could go several directions depending on my choices. He set the phone on the table. Every word of it, his voice unmistakably. Then Cole looked at the phone, then at Greer. I need you to give this formally, when the time comes. Greer said nothing. He looked at the recording as if calculating something private and necessary, the weight of 4 years carrying this in his jacket pocket against the weight of what formally handing it over would require of him and cost him. I almost deleted it 3 times, he said finally. The night I resigned, a year later when I thought it was over, about 8 months ago when I thought nobody would ever care enough to use it. He paused. Something stopped me every time. I still don't entirely know what. Can I have a copy tonight? Already sent it to 2 separate email addresses before I drove here. He picked up the phone and slid it back into his pocket, just in case. Cole returned to the precinct that evening to find a handwritten note from Vera on his desk. A maintenance worker named Carl Okafor had come to the building that afternoon while Cole was out. He had left his name and number with Vera. He had told her only that he had something the captain needed to see. Cole called him immediately. Carl came in the following morning at 8:15, his phone already queued to the footage, and placed it on Cole's desk without preliminary. The hallway video was clear and time-stamped every second of it. Nolan's face, his hands, the words from his mouth, Cole kneeling on the tile floor, the laughter rising and filling the corridor. All of it permanent, undeniable, and already copied to 3 separate locations before Carl had driven to the precinct. Cole watched the footage without speaking. When it ended, he looked at Carl Okafor. Why did you record it? Carl thought about that for a moment. Because the man on the floor was too calm for someone who didn't know something the rest of us didn't. He paused. And because I've been in this building 11 years, and I was tired of watching things disappear. 5 days later, the Tribune ran a second story. This time, Marcus Greer was named by name. And before 7:00 a.m. that morning, before most of the city had finished their first cup of coffee, someone had called his employer. The second Hargrove Tribune article appeared online at 6:38 a.m. on day 5. This one had a name in it. The headline, "Captain's Key Witness Has Troubled History with Department." The body was carefully written, vague enough to survive a legal challenge, specific enough to inflict real damage. Anonymous sources described Marcus Greer's departure from the 7th Precinct as performance-related. No direct accusations. Nothing that could be challenged in court. But the implication sitting inside every sentence was clear: this man was not a credible witness. He was a disgruntled former employee with a history and an agenda, and the public deserved to know it before anything he said was taken seriously. It had been published before most of Hargrove had started its first pot of coffee. At 7:04 a.m., Greer called Cole. His voice was different from the diner. The measured steadiness was still there, but something underneath it had frayed badly overnight and not recovered. "They called my firm," Greer said. "Before 7 a.m. Darius. Someone called my manager and told him there were questions about my record from the department. My manager pulled me into his office before I'd even sat down at my desk." A pause with real weight to it. "He asked me if there was anything about my resignation he should know about. Like I had been hiding something." Cole kept his voice completely even. "What they just did, calling your employer, misrepresenting your departure, doing it specifically because you are cooperating with this investigation that is witness intimidation. That is a federal offense." Silence on the line. "When I file formally with my DOJ contact, you become a federally protected whistleblower under statute. That protection is immediate and enforceable. They cannot touch your employer, your professional record, your livelihood, none of it. Not one phone call, not one anonymous tip without criminal exposure." A long pause. "You sure about that?" "Yes." A shorter pause. "Then tell me what I need to do." Cole hung up. He sat still. He wrote 2 words on his legal pad: witness intimidation. He underlined both. Lieutenant Braddock filed a statement with the OPS that same morning. Nominally neutral, every word chosen carefully, every sentence technically accurate and strategically pointed. He had observed nothing unusual in the precinct on Tuesday morning. He described Nolan as a stabilizing presence with an exemplary record of community engagement. No direct false statements. Yet, every line angled with precision toward someone else's version of events. Cole read it twice, added Braddock's name below the 2 underlined words, and underlined his name as well. Officer Jalen Parks knocked at Cole's office door at 4:48 p.m. He had not been called. He closed the door behind him carefully and stood before Cole's desk with the expression of a man who had been running the same internal argument for 6 months and had finally completely lost it sometime in the past 24 hours. "I've been here 6 months, Parks said. His voice was steady. "Every week there's a version of it. Patrol reassignments, reports that go missing, comments made just loud enough for me to hear and just quiet enough to deny." He paused. "I almost quit 3 times. Wrote my resignation letter twice. Never sent it." Cole said nothing. He waited. Parks reached into his uniform jacket and placed a small spiral notebook on the desk. It landed with the particular weight of something carried a long time in a small space. "I started writing things down my 2nd week here," he said. "Dates, times, exactly what was said and who was present. I had no plan for it. I didn't know if it would ever matter." He looked at the notebook. I just kept writing because it was the only thing that made what was happening feel real. Like it was actually happening to me, and I wasn't imagining the whole thing. That Cole looked at the notebook, then at Parks. It matters, he said. He pushed a formal statement form across the desk. Parks picked up the pen. His hand was steady when he signed, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he had made the decision before he walked through the door, and a decision already made only requires that you not leave. When he finished, he set the pen down and exhaled slowly. There's something else, Parks said. 3 months ago, Nolan pulled me aside after a briefing, just the two of us in the corridor. Told me the 7th could be a good place for someone like me as long as I understood how things worked. He met Cole's eyes directly. Then he said to stay in my lane. Those were his exact words. Cole wrote it down. Supplemental statement, yes. Parks stood. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame, the posture Cole had come to recognize across this week. The posture of someone deciding whether the last thing is worth the breath it costs. I thought about leaving so many times, Parks said without turning around. I kept thinking about what it would mean if I did, what it would say about everything I'd already survived to get here. A pause. So I stayed. I don't know if that was smart or just stubborn. Cole looked at the spiral notebook on his desk. 6 months of dates and observations written in the dark with no recipient and no plan by a young officer who had stayed when every reasonable calculation said go. It was both, Cole said. And it was right. Parks left. Cole sat alone for a moment in the quiet. Outside the window, the lot was dark and nearly empty. He looked at his legal pad, 3 fronts, every dependency mapped, every sequence ready. He drove back to the precinct at 11:15 p.m. and sat in the empty parking lot with the legal pad open on his knee, confirming every sequence one final time. Then he looked up at the building. His building. His precinct. Its windows burning in the October dark. Tomorrow the machine would meet something it had never encountered before. A person who had read every page of its playbook and was not afraid of a single line. He had work to do. He was at his desk by 4:20 a.m. on day 6. The building ran quietly around him, distant dispatch radio. The slow footsteps of the overnight shift below the particular stillness of a precinct that believed the past week had gone in its favor and did not yet understand that it was wrong. 3 pages of legal pad in front of him. 3 fronts. Every move sequenced, every dependency mapped, every piece timed against every other piece, so that when it landed, it would land from all directions at once. He made the first call at 6 a.m. Supervisory Agent Patricia Lowe, DOJ Civil Rights Division, answered on the second ring. Cole walked her through everything. 15 minutes. No detours. The 4 officers. The pattern. The camera maintenance request filed under Nolan's signature before Cole's appointment was public. Carl Okafor's video. Greer's recording. Parks' 6 months of documentation. The pre-dawn call to Greer's employer. When Cole finished, Lowe was quiet for a moment. The Hargrove PD has been on our passive monitoring list since 2020, she said. A civil rights complaint went cold that year when the complainant withdrew. We always believed that withdrawal was coerced. A pause. What you're describing reactivates that prior complaint and adds 5 years of additional pattern evidence. This is not an internal disciplinary matter, Captain Cole. This is a federal civil rights investigation. Something settled in Cole's chest. Solid and permanent. My witness needs federal protection first, Cole said. Marcus Greer. The call to his employer was deliberate and documented. He needs whistleblower coverage before he gives formal testimony. The moment he agrees to cooperate with our investigation, that protection is immediate and enforceable, Lowe said. Employment professional record livelihood protected from any form of retaliation whatsoever. I'll call him personally this morning. A pause. You'll have a formal letter of federal inquiry by end of day. That letter changes the legal landscape of everything currently in motion at the OPS level. Their attorneys will advise them accordingly. Good, Cole said. I want them to know the ground has shifted. He called Vera at 8 a.m. She answered before the first ring completed. Cole told her what he needed: the full 5-year cross-referenced file submitted formally to OPS as official evidence with her name on it as submitting witness. Every page, every date, every document she had kept for 6 years on the belief that the right person would eventually sit in the right chair. What time? Vera asked. Noon. Samantha Cross's office. I'll be there at 11:45, she said, and hung up. The third call went to Samantha Cross, who confirmed that Carl Okafor's video footage would be formally submitted to the OPS panel as evidence of premeditated obstruction. Nolan's signature, the timestamp, the precise geography of which. Camera went dark, and when. Premeditation changed the legal category of everything sitting on top of it, and both of them understood that without saying it. By noon, all 3 fronts were simultaneously in motion. At 4:17 p.m., the formal letter of federal inquiry was received at the OPS. At 4:22, Samantha Cross called. Dennis Harwick just called me, she said, and her voice for the first time since this had all started carried something close to quiet satisfaction. He wants to know if we're open to a conversation. And Cole looked out his window at the parking lot below. Tell him we'll see him at the hearing. He drew a single clean line through each of the 3 fronts on his legal pad. Then he allowed himself exactly 30 seconds to feel what momentum felt like when it shifted, when everything that had been grinding against you started grinding the other way. Then he opened the next file and kept working. At 7:30 a.m. on day 7, Lieutenant Frank Braddock was standing outside Cole's office door. The building was filling up around him with morning shift energy and ordinary sounds. But Braddock was standing completely still in the middle of all of it, the stillness of a man who had run out of reasons not to come sooner. He looked terrible. Not sick, but the specific terrible of a man who had argued with himself through most of the night and lost around 3 a.m. Come in, Cole said. Braddock sat across the desk with his hands clasped and his posture slightly forward. He looked at his hands first, then at Cole. Nolan called me last night, he said. Around 9:30. He wasn't asking, he was telling me to stay consistent in whatever I said to the OPS. A pause. Those were his exact words. And then he reminded me that people who understood how things worked at the 7th tended to come out fine. People who didn't. He stopped. That's a threat, Cole said. Yes, Braddock said simply. It is. He was quiet for a moment. Cole let it hold. There's something else, Braddock said. Nolan had a contact in HR, someone with access to the appointment scheduling system. The camera maintenance request was filed 2 days before your appointment was publicly announced, which means someone told him you were coming before the department made it official. He looked up. The boot incident wasn't spontaneous. He planned it. He knew exactly who you were when you walked through that door, and he did it anyway. The room was very still. I'll testify to all of it, Braddock said. He placed a written recantation on the desk, every part of his OPS statement that had shaded toward Nolan's version formally retracted. The complaint routing, the deliberate reassignments, the HR contact, what I was told to cover, and what I chose to cover for 20 years. He paused. Whatever that costs me, I'll pay it. McCole looked at the document, then at the man across the desk. Why now? He asked, genuinely. Braddock was quiet for a long moment. My daughter is in her first year of law school, he said, his voice going quieter. She called me last week excited about something, and I sat in my kitchen after Nolan's call, and I thought about the kind of man I want to be when she passes the bar and calls me from the courtroom. He met Cole's eyes. And I thought about Tuesday morning, and about the 6 people before Tuesday, and about 20 years of choosing the math that said looking away was cheaper. Succinctum. Cole held his gaze. Be in that room, Lieutenant, he said. Truthful testimony. Everything you know and everything you were told to cover. That's what I need. I'll be there, Braddock said. No hesitation. He straightened his jacket and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. I'm sorry, he said without turning. For all of it. For 20 years of all of it. Cole looked at the back of his head. The graying hair, the tired shoulders of a man who had arrived very late at the right choice. Be in that room, Cole said. That's what it's worth. The hearing was set for the following morning. Every piece was in place. The machine had a wrench in it now, large, permanent, positioned exactly where it needed to be. The hearing room was on the 3rd floor of the federal building on Caldwell Street. Cole arrived at 8:10 a.m. He wanted to see it empty. He set his files at the department table clean stack, tabbed, indexed every document in the exact order he would need it. Then he stood at the north-facing windows and let the flat morning light fall across him for 1 full minute, and thought about nothing at all. Vera Hutchins arrived first, carrying her navy binder in both hands. 22 years of documentation, every page earned in the particular silence of a person who keeps records, because she believes a room like this one is always possible. She placed the binder beside Cole's files, sat down, and folded her hands. Samantha Cross arrived at 8:30. Marcus Greer at 8:40, 2 hours of highway behind him, composed in the way of a man who had made his decision long before he got in the car. Parks at 8:45 in dress uniform, chin level. Braddock at 8:52, 1 second in the doorway, then he crossed the floor and sat behind the department table without a word. Nolan entered at 8:55 with Benson and their union attorney. He scanned the room force of habit, the reflex of a man accustomed to being the person other people positioned themselves around. His eyes found Greer in the gallery. Something happened in his face. Fast, involuntary, gone in under a second. But Cole saw it, the slight contraction, the micro-recalibration of a man who had expected a different room than the one he had just walked into. His eyes moved to Braddock. This reaction was harder to hide. His jaw tightened. He leaned toward his attorney and spoke rapidly in a low voice. Agent Patricia Lowe was already seated at the DOJ observer position. She had arrived before Cole. Judge Carl Whitmore, OPS panel chair, entered at exactly 9:00 a.m. with the unhurried patience of a man who had presided over difficult rooms for 40 years and had never once found them surprising. The hearing moved with the clean, methodical pace of a process thoroughly prepared on one side and not on the other. Carl Okafor's video played first. The room watched Nolan's face on the screen, watched his hands, heard every word from his mouth. Watched Cole kneeling on the tile floor, steady and expressionless. Nobody moved. Harwick's pen moved across his notepad too fast for composure. Greer's audio recording played next. 5 minutes and 42 seconds of Nolan's voice, unmistakable and clear. When it ended, the silence that followed had a different quality, the silence of people living on the far side of something they could not unhear. Park's notebook was entered into evidence. Vera's 5-year cross-referenced file was presented page by page, every name, every departure, every date. Braddock's full testimony followed the complaint routing the deliberate reassignments, the instructions to look away, and the name of the HR contact who had delivered Cole's arrival date to Nolan before the appointment was publicly announced. Premeditation. The word settled into the room like a stone into still water. During the recess, Benson's shoulders dropped. Harwick spoke to him quietly in the corner for 8 minutes. Then Harwick crossed the floor to Samantha Cross. They spoke for 4 minutes. Samantha returned and leaned close to Cole. Benson wants to negotiate. Resignation cooperative statement, no criminal referral. Permanent law enforcement certification, ban all 50 states. Cole looked at the clean stack of files, 7 days built from nothing but truth and careful hands. Accept it. Benson walked out without looking at anyone. Nolan sat alone. He fought. He invoked 25 years of service, attacked every witness called. Braddock's recantation coerced, called Greer's testimony self-serving, called Park's notebook inadmissible. He performed the wronged man with the practiced skill of someone who had performed it many times before and had always been believed. Judge Whitmore let him finish without a single interruption. Then he opened his folder and read without performance, without pause, in the same measured voice he had used for every word of the proceeding. The 6-year pattern, the disproportionate targeting, the camera maintenance request filed under Nolan's signature 2 days before Cole's appointment was publicly announced, premeditation documented, and undeniable. Witness intimidation. And then the determination termination with cause effective immediately. Pension forfeiture review. Criminal referral to the district attorney. Federal referral in coordination with the DOJ inquiry. Full review of all union complaints filed at the 7th Precinct over 6 years. The hearing is concluded. The room exhaled. Nolan's face had gone gray beneath the performance, the expression of a man who had believed so completely in his own institutional protection that reality had no framework to land in. He looked across the room at Cole. Cole met his eyes for exactly 1 second. Not with anger, not with satisfaction. With the same calm, unhurried steadiness he had brought to the floor of the east hallway 8 days ago when a boot was in his hands and a room full of men waited for him to break. Then Cole looked away, by choice, because he was finished with Nolan. He looked at Greer instead. Marcus Greer sat in the gallery with his eyes closed for just a moment, face turned slightly upward, the expression of a man setting down a weight he had carried so long he had forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. Cole was the last to leave. He sat alone in the room for 3 minutes. Flat afternoon light through the windows, empty chairs, his clean stack of files, nothing out of place. He thought about a parking lot at 7:28 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. He thought about a boot on a tile floor and the choice he made when he knelt down and picked it up. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. He did not look back. 3 weeks later, the structural changes were embedded and running a new complaint intake process through Vera's office external wellness check-ins with no internal reporting chain. A joint OPS and DOJ review of 6 years of union complaints. Quiet work, the kind that outlasts headlines. Parks stopped Cole in the corridor on his way to detective track orientation. He looked at him with the direct gaze of someone who had decided that saying the thing was better than carrying it home. "Thank you," Parks said. "For all of it." Cole looked at the steady hands, the level chin, the third-year patch that had nearly been turned in 3 separate times. "You did the hard part," Cole said. "You stayed. You wrote it down. The rest was paperwork." Parks smiled brief real and kept walking. On Cole's desk, a letter waited in Greer's handwriting. "Captain Cole, I drove 2 hours to sit in that room. I would have driven 20. You gave me a reason to believe the badge still means something. I kept that recording for 4 years because I refused to stop believing the truth would eventually matter to someone with the authority to use it. Thank you for being that person. Marcus Greer. Cole folded the letter, placed it in the top drawer, opened the first personnel file of the morning. Outside his window, the parking lot was filling up his building, his precinct humming with the ordinary sounds of people doing the work. Some of them still hadn't made their peace with who was running this precinct. Some probably wouldn't for a while. That was fine. He didn't need their peace. He needed their professionalism and their compliance with a code of conduct now enforced by someone who had read every file in this building and intended to keep reading. He picked up his pen. He had work to do. Dignity does not need permission. It does not disappear when powerful men laugh at it, and it does not break when institutions try to bury it. What Darius Cole understood, and what Terry Nolan never did, is that the person who stays calm documents everything, and keeps showing up is always more dangerous than the person who simply has the loudest voice in the room. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Tell me where in the world you are watching from and what hit you hardest. And if you believe these stories matter, subscribe. The next one is already waiting.